Thanks for tuning in to the Replatform podcast sponsored by Ampliance and Clavio. You're listening to myself, James Gurd. My co-host Paul Rogers is not with us today. I believe he had a very exciting night out with his business last night. Hello to our regular listeners. Warm welcome if you're joining us for the first time. Do subscribe to get episode alerts because we land a new one every week. And we'd love you to give us a like on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. to make us feel all warm inside. So our topic today is a really important one. It's about the changes that are happening with Google Analytics and the move to GA4. And we've got two specialists who are going to be able to provide a lot of practical advice and guidance today. So first, I'll welcome Jill Quick, who is the owner of the colouring department. Hi, Jill. How are you doing?
Hello. Nice to see you. Hello.
Thanks for joining us. Do you want to give people a quick flavour for who you are and what you do?
I always hate these bits because it's like writing your own CV, isn't it? Talking about yourself. My name is Jill, and I love a little bit of measurement. So I focus on all things to do with measuring your websites and your marketing, and that will be done through training or audits or guides or consultancy. And I primarily focus on analytics, and then I do a little bit of data visualization. But right now, quite busy with GA4, which is the topic of today.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, I know what you mean. The it's basically a chance to big yourself up. It's good.
It's slightly awkward. It's a bit British still to be like, oh.
Yes, I'm conservative. I will not say how good I am. Excellent. And we also have Anna Lewis, who's the founder of Polka Dot Data. Hi, Anna. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
And thanks also for taking the time to join us. And do you want to do the same? What's who you are? What do you do?
Sure. So I'm Anna. I've been working in analytics for far too long. I don't like to admit it because it makes me feel old. But yeah, started out in SEO, PPC, done agency work. And then 6 years ago, I left the in-house analytics role I was in. So I'd set up GTM and enhanced e-commerce when it was fresh out the box, in-house for a big brand, and started my own agency so that I could do it my way and help the people I wanted to, work with the people I want to. And now, 6 years down the line, Polka Dot Data's got some really nice clients, and we do a lot of the Google platform with regards to analytics. So it's Google Analytics implementations, auditing, re-platforming people, supporting with that. Then it's analysis, insights, dashboarding. I've got a little team of 4 people at the moment. We just like helping people use their data to make more money. That is the base of it, really. Sounds corny.
It all boils down to money. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you very much. So just before I start asking the annoying questions, just for those listening, a few key things you're going to get from today's episode, which is well worth carrying on listening. So number one is, what's the big change for Google Analytics and what it means to e-commerce teams? How to plan for GA4 migrations? What to do about historical data? What are some of the differences in GA4? And alternatives for those who maybe have had enough and decided that actually they need to look for an alternative analytics platform. So that's the key things. So let's start with the first question. So Anna, I'll direct this one to you first. What is happening to Universal Analytics, and how important is it for e-commerce teams to understand this and act now? What are the risks of basically inaction?
So it is pretty important. Unlike before, when Google Analytics moved from Classic or even Urchin through to Universal Analytics, they didn't actually turn off any of the tools. But this time they have now said that they will be turning off Universal Analytics tracking. It won't collect any new data from the end of June next year, so 2023. So really what we're saying to businesses is if you haven't already got some GA4 tracking in place, get something up and running so that you're at least tracking basic data and some conversions before June this year. What I'd say is start quick and dirty if you need to, but just get something, and then by the end of June this year, have a good implementation, because things will be changing. And from June next year, you want to be able to look at your historical data. So that's why we're saying by June this year, it'd be really good to make sure that you do look at your data. And it's good to just start diving into it and getting an understanding for what it is and how it's different, and whether or not you want to think about a different platform before that time, so that, again, in a year's time, you can do a historical look back and measure your performance year on year, because that's what a lot of businesses rely on. So that's why we're saying act now.
And there really is a small window of action, because you're right, to get that 12-month historical data, you can't sit on your heels for the next 4 to 6 weeks. You've got to start acting now.
Exactly.
And Jill, a question for you. Can you run people through what is GA4 and how it differs to UA? Because I think some people still don't grasp this. I think they think it's just like Anna, you were saying, like, it's the latest version of GA rather than it's a fundamental change.
Yeah, it's I'd go as far to say that I think the positioning from Google Analytics saying that it's an upgrade is slightly underwhelming. The actual work that's ahead of you, really, it's a little bit, there's a bit more work ahead of us, basically. So the way that I've been describing this change to people is likening analytics to methods of transportation. So when Urchin came out, that would have been our bike analytics, and then when it upgraded to the classic, that was like getting a moped, and we were all really happy because the moped was a little bit better than the bike. And then in 2012 we get universal analytics, which is essentially a car, and that did feel like an upgrade, and I know with Anna working on a lot of brands at that time doing all the enhanced e-commerce, we were all, as analysts and marketeers using analytics, really happy with this. 10 years on, and we now have the fourth version of analytics, which, despite Google calling it an upgrade, it's essentially a helicopter. And we've all been used to a car. We've been driving it. We've been a passenger. Some of us have got better cars than others. Some people have got sports cars and minibuses. But Google's kind of changed the model. So the data model for the car and the helicopter, whilst there are some similarities, they have doors, they have windows and seat belts, it is a completely different model. So whilst Google's saying it's an upgrade, the majority of people can't fly a helicopter. So there's this steep learning curve to understand the data model, which is moving away from a hit-based model to a user and event-based model, which kind of brings GA4 into the kind of Adobe kind of analytics and quite a few of the complicated analytics products that people paid for. So with that, it's not quite new. And for a number of reasons, it's been needed. We have got a lot of challenges ahead of us with cookieless tracking, with third-party cookies dropping off, and basically just tracking is getting a little bit harder. The car couldn't really adapt to that ecosystem. And I know we might touch on it in this call, but I think a lot of the stuff going on in Europe with GDPR, I think that's accelerated Google's decision to push the car to basically be burned with fire and force everybody to use the helicopter. So it's quite a lot of neuroplasticity to get going, that we've all been used to having this user session hit-based data model, and now we're going to everything is an event. And I still struggle, I'm sure. I'm hoping Anna's like, no, me too. Page views, now an event. And I'm like, oh, that used to be a hit. So there's some things to kind of get your head around. But I mean, there are some things that I don't like, and there are some things that I really, really love. And I think if we can sit with our feelings. I know that there's people listening to this that are hacked off. There's a disappointment, there's an anger, because we thought we had longer. We thought we had more time, because I think there's some sites that I've audited that still use Classic. I saw one in America that was using Urchin, and I'm like, my God, like, it's still going. And this is a completely different way of looking at it. So the data model, it won't look like universal. And I think that's the biggest shock, isn't it? When people log in, they're like, what fresh hell is this? Where is everything? I'm like, yeah, it's a helicopter. It's not, where's the steering wheel? You've got a gear stick now. Where's this? Oh, that's a new dashboard over here. What's BigQuery? Oh, that's the black box to your helicopter. And they're all like, where's my car? I like my car. So it's familiarizing yourself, but also being kind to yourself that this is not as simple as click on the upgrade button. We're all getting the message now, aren't we? The little banner saying, please upgrade. That's where I think it's a little bit unfair to call it an upgrade, because an upgrade is take my knocked out old banger car and give me a Tesla. And what you're doing is taking the keys away from my car and telling me to fly a helicopter. That is a big jump,
Yeah, a sub-question related to that is, so Anna, you touched about the need to build up historical data, and what will people need to do with that old UA data to be able to use it in conjunction with new data and be able to do historical comparisons of different years? Because from my understanding, I don't understand it like you two do. My understanding is the data model is that different, that you can't just compare like for like reports. There's going to be a different way to be able to compare year on year going back historically. What advice do you have for that?
So what I would actually recommend is think about what is going to be beneficial to the business. Actually, you don't necessarily need every single data point from to do your historical analysis. Quite often your historical analysis is going to be the key business KPIs and what is there for your business objectives and your stakeholder reporting. It won't always be the granular data that you use for your daily insights and optimization. So if you think that your business needs 2 or 3 years worth of comparisons, trend lines, that sort of thing, understand which metrics it is that are important to your business. And if you need to export anything, export those. And there are a couple of tools out there to help you with that. All the data comes with the same caveats. To export from Universal Analytics, you're going to be using the API, or you're going to be using, putting it into a BigQuery type thing. So getting that data, some people think it's going to be really important, but I actually think it's a really nice opportunity, especially where the last 2 years have been so unpredictable. They're not on trend. Seasons haven't been seasons. They've been lockdowns. So actually, it's a really good time to just say, screw it, get your new data set up now, start afresh, and be happy to bin off Universal at some point in the next 12 months and switch all your reports over. So you've got a bit of time to be able to start, building those reports up, getting those data points. And honestly, sometimes it matters what happened 2 years ago, but it's been such a freaking weird time that just start afresh, start post COVID. Let's just go with, this is the new world, the new 2022 onwards. Everything starts from now. It's been a weird few years. We'll just start reporting and do any comparisons to 2022, not those weird things that were 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, and just for the sake of clarity, have I answered this correctly? You won't have access to old UA data, so you need to export it before the end of life, or will you still have access to old accounts to be able to go in to data?
They're going to keep it for 6 months once it's stopped reporting, and a bit longer if you're a 360 client. So once it stops tracking in June, or I think it's October for premium clients, 360, then at that point you get 6 months. They'll keep it there, accessible for you to, those final people who are going to be panicking at that point and wanting to download or compare. There's a little bit of leeway. But yeah, just start planning for the end, unfortunately. I mean, my metaphor for this, I love Jill's one. Mine's my very simple one is that Universal has been your cat, and it's sat there and it's reliable. You know where you stand with it, and it's all there. It's always there for you, and you know how it works. And you've just been told you've got to take on this new puppy, and so you've just got this excitable thing that it is new and shiny and exciting. And that's okay. You've got to be positive and embrace this change. But some people aren't ready for a new puppy. So you need to train it, and you do need to do a bit of work. Yeah. So you need to get ready for that, and prepare your ecosystem and your business for that. So that you can, get your puppy training license, your helicopter license, whatever the metaphor is. It's something we have to learn or move.
And I think what's a really nice point there, Anna, as well, is factoring in that the last 2 years worth of data is completely wild. And I understand the frustration that people want to hold on to their data because it's something tangible for all the nebulous marketing things that we do. So people feel very attached to it. But when I've been doing GA migrations, one of the things we've looked at with the situation analysis, and I don't say this lightly because I know that analytics is wonderful, but I've yet to do an audit where there was not a problem in the data collection configuration. So when people are doing like-for-like comparisons with the car and the helicopter, UA and GA4, you need to do a quick review of your universal analytics with things like, what was the common things I've seen for e-commerce? Referral exclusion list. So I had one account where their GA4 did include all of their payment gateways, so their attribution was going to the source before their own tech stack. Universal wasn't, it was half-baked. So you were doing like for like, but half the attribution was misattributed from the offset. We also had problems where they were accidentally, because nobody does this on purpose, accidentally putting personal identifiable information in. So we don't want to be exporting all the all pages data, because you're going to have to add a segment to go, and don't take anything naughty, because you don't want to carry a lawsuit into your next data warehouse. So I think whilst there is, obviously we're attached to the data that we've had because it's been there for such a long time, the cat that sat in the sunshine, and we know it's there, and it's great. But do bear in mind that not all that data is equal. And as you said, Anna, focusing on trends for your marketing channels, having a look at what content's been really popular, your product data. And I think importantly with e-commerce people, yes, Google Analytics can give you information about your products, but Google Analytics or any analytics platform was never designed to be a shopping account system. You go to Shopify for all of your really good data on your products. GA, any other tool you're using, is to go, what am I doing in my marketing tech stack? How's the optimization of my website, the usability, and using that data to base success and strategies on. So bearing that in mind, it's like, do you download absolutely everything? Probably not. Do you need to do a situation analysis? Yes, because there are key things you want to look at. Your property settings for your referral exclusions. I'd be looking at views with their filters and if they're correct or in the right order, and then make a decision for those like for like reports, which are not apples for apples, as we know, they're very different. And using that to give some guidance when you're presenting the future reports, that we need to put some caveats that the old data is I refer to it as a confabulation of data, lies honestly told. You don't know what you don't know. And if the data is a bit squiffy, then you don't necessarily want to be presenting that as the primary source. So yeah, do it with caution, think about what you need, and think about those reports that you're focusing on. I always say to some clients as well, if you imagine them as physical things in your house and every report is kind of the size of this, you can only carry what you have in your hand. What data do you save from the burning house? Because it is being set on fire. What's important to you? And
I love these analogies. It's like the apocalypse.
This is where people go, oh, well, I want my conversion data by source and medium, and I want to know the all pages data because I'm doing loads of SEO, and I want to know what the return on ad spend is being for my investments. And I'm like, great, focus on that first, and then work on other bits. You don't need the audience data. You don't need the device data. You can get that from other places.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice takeaway insight is focus and priority, because don't conflate it with BI, because there are other systems that will give you that historical sales data that will be more accurate as well, because it's not sampled, for example. I got a question related to this, Anna, is how ready is GA4? Because from what I've seen, people seem to be using the two in parallel, or people, like you said before, have set up a GA4 property but have done nothing with it. So, what's missing at the moment?
The good thing is that you don't have to worry as much as you did when they first told everybody to move to GA4. That was what has probably started off some of this sort of bottom line hostility towards it, is that when they were pushing people to it initially, that's when it had the biggest gaps. And that's when we were saying, well, it's not client ready. Don't do this. So back in 2020, we were talking about, yes, implement it, but it is not capable of being your main reporting platform at this stage. It didn't integrate with Data Studio. It didn't even have e-commerce to start with when it was launched. So for a lot of us, we're like, well, okay, put it on, but you cannot, rely on it in those early days. And that's why it's been a really sort of awkward transition, especially because they've ended up transitioning during a pandemic when there is so much other stuff going on in our lives. We're trying to keep businesses and households afloat, and then we've got to make sure that people are getting up to date with technology. So it is way better now. And I would say it is capable and competent now. The gaps, there's not too many. There's not too many anymore. There's a couple of downsides, but predominantly they've fixed those bits. So it is looking better. So
the biggest takeaway, because I know that we were having a chat with this about one of your client migrations, like getting your events ready. The capabilities of GA4, and we can talk about, the opportunities in a moment, but the key part to getting GA4 correct is getting the right events for you. And for the e-commerce people that are going to be listening to this, the out-of-the-box events are not enough. So if you just do the baseline core configuration, you're like, well, this is rubbish. It doesn't have anything, because you need to customize it. And once you get those events in for all of your e-commerce and all of the other information points, then everything gets better. The exploration reports get better. The audiences get better. But if you don't have the event data to begin with, none of it works. And I think that's the part where people have gone, oh, wow, this is really good, but we've got some work to do to think strategically about what was the dimension, metric, category, action label in Universal Analytics, and how do I migrate it to GA4? So it feels like, or I at least at the moment feel like, what all of the SEOs feel like when they do migrations. I'm like, oh, is this what you feel like when you're going from old URL, new URL, old Universal Analytics to this one? That's the bit where I think if you get that bit right, the stuff that people quite rightly are complaining about is because you don't know what you don't know, because the information about getting ready for GA4 hasn't quite been the best. And I think we can all admit that. And I think GA could admit that. The documentation has been a bit slow to come out. They've relied more on the community to say what's happening and how does it work. But the logging in and going, well, this is shit because I can't see this report. I'm like, well, you need to build the event for you to get it. And that's the kind of flexibilization, isn't it? And, we've had loads of conversations, Anna, about like migrating events and best practices and things like that. It work. Like,
interestingly, this is what I always said with Universal Analytics. Not every business is the same. You have to customize it to get what you need out of it. So that's the key thing with GA4, is understanding the new customizations and the new way of doing that. I have now, finally, my brain's caught up with me, and I've remembered the key things that are missing or different. So one of them is that channel groups at the moment can't be edited. So you have to get your UTM tracking right. Otherwise, it shows up as unassigned in your channel summary report. So that's something that, people have been used to fixing the crap data that was coming in by remapping in your default channel groupings in Universal. But at the moment, you can't edit your channel groupings in GA4. They have expanded the default ones to include organic social and paid social, which is great. So they are seeing what we need as marketers. So some of the customizations they're now building in as native features, which is brilliant. But yeah, UTM tracking is even more important. On the plus side, they've added new UTM parameters. So that's really helpful. There's even more bits going on there. And you've got separate dimensions for first session channel and, first user channel and first session and the session channel. So you can do those analysis when you want to do it, look at the data in different ways. The only other real frustration that I see in every day is that your segments, you can't just build a segment and save it and share it with somebody and have it accessible a few clicks away. Every time you want to do a segment, it's called a condition, and you have to apply it to that report, and then it disappears when you've turned it off, and you have to rebuild it every time. So you have to go and choose your dimensional metric and then put your filter conditions in place. So conditions, that's a little bit frustrating at the moment. There's also a lot of manual configuration required within the interface that maybe wasn't quite as complex as Universal. So again, it's great from my point of view because I work with custom implementations day to day. But for everyday small businesses, it is going to be a pain to get it set up in a custom way for them. So yeah, you're going to have the sort of people who want to go down the quick and dirty route. And for them, I'd say just focus on a couple of core events that are really important to your business. And then you've got the other people where we're going to be doing the gap analysis between Universal and GA4. We're going to be doing those event tracking and checking what you've got and what you need. And that's where we'll then, write that new plan, use all the new events, build our own events and use a good naming convention so that we're within the limitations of how many parameters you can have and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities, but there's, some little frustrations too. And actually they've fixed the biggest frustrations, I would say. So it is okay to get started now and start using it as your main reporting platform as soon as you're happy with the data.
I think picking up as well on what you said about the events as well, one thing that I've really liked about the event model is that Google Analytics have provided four different types of events. We've got auto events, so that's what comes with the GA4 configuration tag when you say, "Dear Google, please track this this data stream." You then have enhanced events, which come in your data stream configuration, so things like file downloads, videos, as long as they're YouTube embedded, because Google loves a Google product, site search, things like that. And then outside of that, which is what I would call phase 2 when I map out my task, is where you do that customization. Now, Google have already provided a list of recommended event names and parameters. And what I like about that is that there is a lot of scope for lots of businesses to have the same naming convention, which for me as an analyst is brilliant, because it means what is a way of saying a sale happened across 20 clients is all going to be the same. So I can apply repeated data studio templates because they didn't call their category action label something completely different. So I'm pretty sure that the community over the course of the next year will provide guides to say, hey, if you're an e-commerce, you will probably want these recommended events, and it's going to be a plug and play option. And I'm sure there's loads of opportunities for developers to come in and go, I can do this in my sleep. It's a 4-hour job because you just need this, and this. It's the bits that go to the custom. So I won't name the people that Anna was talking to me about last week, but there was a client that wanted refund data going in there, and it was a bit more specific. So that was specific to them and their business model. That needed a bit more outside of the box thinking, and it didn't fit with recommended or enhanced or auto. And I think having that consistency is going to be really good, because when I move, well, if I move jobs. I've worked for myself for 10 years. I don't know why I just said that. If I am an e-commerce person moving jobs, it means it's going to be the same wherever you go. There's not going to be as much orientation. As analysts and people helping them, there's going to be a consistent approach to what they're doing. And I think that's a positive to come out of this as well, because it means any cheat sheets or tool tips that people are going to give can be applied to lots of different businesses, because we have got that consistency in the structure.
That's really interesting. That's hugely important, because I'm not an analytics specialist, but I work with a lot of clients on analysis work to inform strategy projects. And the number of times I've sat looking at data going, I have no idea what this event relates to, what it's measuring, and we want to track X, Y, and Z. Which of the events does this relate to? Because it's somebody who set it up has no naming conventions at all, which is not. And it's really difficult.
Nice list. A really nice list now. Yeah. And Jill and I are both working off the sheet that she's put together that is really nice, and it says auto, custom, and then also you can build custom events in the interface, so that's kind of cool, in that you can combine events and things like that. So if you haven't quite got that bit tracked specifically, or you don't need to build new events, sometimes you for specific things, like say for example a thank you page of a contact form, if you want to track that as a goal, you have a page view for it, and you have a parameter that tells you what the URL was. So you could put those together to create your custom event in the user interface, and then you just flick one switch and it's a conversion. So it is actually easier to set up goals if it's, if you know what your events and your parameters are. And there's now that really nice, there is it feels more comprehensive naming convention that they've given us out of the box, and we can utilize that in different ways, but it's going to make sense for businesses and make template reporting a little easier. But the key thing is understand it for your business and make sure you note down what you're using these dimensions and the events really for, and how that relates to the business. Always have at least one page of documentation.
Yes, the art of documentation is undervalued in most businesses.
What is Amplience? In a word, it's freedom. The freedom to build a digital experience as limitless as your vision. Create, preview, schedule, and manage all your content in one easy place. Find out more at amplience.com. Amplience. Experience freedom.
So I've got a question. Jill, I'll ask you first, but then interested in your perspective as well, Anna, is we talked a lot about the need to act. The question that will be on most people's mind is, how do I act? So can you talk people through how should businesses approach like migration and rollout for GA4? Like what do they need to do? What are the steps involved, and what resources and skills do they need to achieve this properly?
Yeah. So I think we'll be able to, shamefully plugging one of my guides on my website. I'll send you a link that we can put in the show notes. I've got something called the helicopter method with my lovely anecdote of different types of modes of transportation. I like to break things out into phases because I think there's a lot of information out there about GA4, and some of it is really exciting, but it's also a little bit advanced, and there's a lot of work that you need to have completed as a dependency to get that happening. So the 5 stages that I've got in my plan is the first one, phase 1, is just getting the core configuration, getting the GA4 configuration tag, making sure your data streams are configured like for like with UA, so your referral exclusions and the sites that you're doing, cross-domain tracking. You want to get it as close as possible to what you've got in your car interface. Beyond that, depending on the business model, you can still, as Anna said, with creating events from events, you can still do quite a bit of configuration. You can say, we're tracking file downloads, but I want this particular type of download or a particular name of a download. Maybe it's a guide, maybe it's something like that. You can do all of that in the user interface and get quite a good baseline level amount of data. Phase 2 is where you think about that customization. So we're thinking about looking beyond what we have from out of the box, and you'll be looking at your situation analysis of universal analytics and working through your KPIs first. So the key macro conversions down to your micro conversions, and then working out, well, what events do I need in GA4 to match that? So if you have e-commerce set up, then you need to set up your GA4 e-commerce data. And thankfully, if you've got enhanced e-commerce, GA4 can piggyback off that data layer to build what you need. And I know that there's going to be more tools and connectors that are coming out. I can't remember the name of one, but one's in Google Tag Manager where they basically convert it for you and build those events. So it's there. And then anything more specific, like we're tracking refunds or people that are referring a friend or something like that, then you would build those in as well. But work through a traffic light system. What do I absolutely need? Oh, did they buy the product? And then, did they refer a friend? Oh, that can wait later. We need to get this bit done first and prioritize those events. Phase 3 is when you are collecting that data. You've got a couple of months worth of data. You can start to get familiar with the report. So you are adding secondary dimensions. You're trying to recreate the reports that you are lovingly attached to in Universal Analytics. You might be starting to play around with the funnels and the path analysis, and you're starting to refine any further events with any blind spots, because you don't know until you really start getting into it. Phase 4 is when you're doing some really advanced stuff. We're talking about building audiences, because audiences for me are a complete star in GA4, because we can layer event counts and we can add time. So I can build audiences where I say, show me a user that bought twice in the last 14 days, or show me somebody where the average order value is, say, £50. Who's my high spender? And get them for 100, and we can start adding time to it. Who came on the website and after 5 minutes they converted? And these audiences can be used in your paid media, but I can also use them in my analysis. So there's loads of use cases there, and I've got clients that have done this where they built audiences in GA4 when they were dual tagging to buy people that are more like the ones that are really good users. They buy a lot, they buy quickly, and going over to the ads team and saying, buy me this audience, like here's our audience, do something with it. But we need to have done those previous steps to have collected the events in order to do that. Phase 5 is BigQuery. So something that I know there's a bit of, depending on where you are on the Twitter universe at the moment, there's a bit of an upset, maybe, an anger that they feel like the data retentions in GA4 are going to stop them doing what they need to do. GA4's got a wonderful thing where you can link BigQuery, but Anna knows this as well. There'll be lots of people you speak to and they'll go, never heard of it before, because most people don't. It's been for really big data science teams. You think of BigQuery as the black box to your helicopter. It's tracking absolutely everything. When you're in your reports in GA4, all of your standard reports, so life cycle, the conversions, that kind of thing, that will go on as long as you have been tracking it. So I've got one client that's nearly 2 years in, and we can still do like-for-like comparisons for channels and events that are going on. The data retention settings in GA4 only really focus on the exploration report. So the funnels and the path analysis, the maximum we can do in free is 14 months. If you're on 360 GA4, it's 50. So there will be some use cases where you want BigQuery because you want more data to recreate some of those exploration reports. And the only way you're going to do that is in BigQuery. Or some of the more complicated areas where you've run out of custom dimensions to publish your parameters. And that's something we'll talk about later, because that is another nonsensical way of saying, show me what I'm tracking. You'll need to go into BigQuery for that. But the nice thing with GA4 for some things, I'm not too worried about building funnels and reports, because unlike the car, if you know, and I'm speaking to a load of people that are focused on e-commerce, if we built funnels in the car, they only started showing the data the day that we created those funnels, which is really frustrating, isn't it? When you're like, damn it, I wish I had this for the last year. We can apply the data in GA4 historically. So provided you've been tracking it, future you know, next year, James, can be focusing on building those funnels, because they're gonna be tracking that data. So it's winding it all back to go, this 5-step plan could be anywhere between 12 and 24 months for people to get cracking on. So the key thing at the moment, and I've got all of the little, you know, theory and practical tasks in this guide that I've created, is by, as Anna said, at the end of June, 1st of July, you ideally want to get some data in GA4 so you can do that comparison data. There will be some people that is just not possible. Other projects are happening. Life is going on. We are still living in a pandemic. Loads of people are off sick with COVID at the moment. So it might not happen, in which case do whatever you can do in that time, even if it is just phase 1, getting the core configuration done, and then starting to plan out what you're going to do for phase 2, that customization. And I think for this audience, for the e-commerce listeners, they're all going to be, as we've said, very, very similar looking plans, because of these recommended structures that we'll be able to apply to different places. And then you can learn how to do it. Keep using the car, and you've got a year to kind of get your head around this new model. They're not saying they're getting rid of it now, but I have noticed, I don't know if Anna's noticed as well, UA is getting slow. Like, I'm getting those error messages. I'm like, God, the car it's not being serviced. There's no MOT on it. It is falling apart. And I don't know if that's by design or if it's just creaky servers and they're getting ready. You will find that you'll be using GA4 more when you start implementing it. And for me now, I don't actually look at my own UA anymore. I look at GA4 first, because I'm training myself, and I've been doing that for the last year, that I'm quite used to it. It's just getting used to a new environment. But you have to start at one level. And if you do one thing, get that done today, and then, you know, you can then start getting the next bits focused later.
Yeah, that sounds like a really sensible, structured approach. That's nice. So we will add the link to our webpage just so people can view that guide. So Anna, a question for you is that some people, I guess smaller businesses, it'd be easier to pivot away from GA if they think this is too complex. I want to cover off 5 alternatives, because, you know, there are other platforms out there. What, from your point of view, do you consider to be viable alternatives for businesses if they decide that they want to evaluate an alternative?
I hate this. I'm going to put some money in the Measure Camp swear jar for saying it depends.
Every consultant has to have it depends in the armory.
Absolutely. So with what I would say is, before you decide that, do your quick and dirty GA4 implementation. And I'm calling it quick and dirty because, quite honestly, you can get a GA4 stream set up and tagged. If you've got GA and you've got GTM, you can get it up and running. The basic page view and enhanced metrics in less than an hour. You can just do a quick and dirty. So you could get that up and running nice and quick, and then you can start thinking, well, actually, could I work with this? So that is my first approach, is the quick and dirty GA4, instead of, you know, you can spend a lot of budget planning it, doing it really, really well. And we will be doing this for some clients, but others, you know, we just get it and get started. Now, you can do that with other tools as well. And so for the small business, so there's like businesses who just want to see, am I getting some sessions? Am I getting some data? Oh, why is Sunday really, really busy? I'd recommend Fathom. That gives you a one-pager, and it's cookieless tracking, so it's really nice for privacy. And it's just straightforward. It gives you the dashboard, and that's great. That's what people need. So that's the simple one, where you don't need the custom funnels, where you don't need to do the segments and the deeper analysis and the insights and all of this. Where you do need to do that more in-depth analysis, people are moving to Matamo. Anyway, that one, or some of the others. I've seen people enjoying HubSpot over the last couple of years as well. There's a lot to be said for HubSpot because of the sort of CRM integration, and it does the on-site analysis too. So that's actually a really good tool. Again, that might be looking on the more premium side, like the others. So yeah, those are good. And then you've got Adobe. If you're an enterprise level business, if you're considering that, GA4 is a bit more like the Adobe platform, because you have to sort of build those reports. And that's another nice thing about GA4, I think, but that we're not used to. We've had our cat there. The reports are always accessible. The cat's always on the sofa. But with GA4, your puppy's all over the place, but you can train it. You can give it new reports. You can customize your whole reporting interface to have what matters to you. And so that's really nice. And that sort of echoes where Adobe Analytics and Omniture have been for years, in that, well, it's all about customizing your tracking setup and then customizing what reports you want out of it. And that's because they know that enterprise businesses are all different. They are all different. They need different KPIs. And the key thing is, what does your business need? So just before you start just looking into all the tools, turn your computer off and write a list. What does my business need? What is my business trying to achieve? Is it worldwide growth? Is it customer growth? Is it this market? Is it revenue increase, profit increase, awareness? What is it? And think about, well, what data points do I then need for that? We're coming back to, step one on the analytics training course. Why the hell do you have a website? Why do you want to track anything? And then what do you need to track? And then you can think about, well, what do I want my report to look like? And if I want a really interactive report and I want this and that, you're going to be looking at things that integrate with Tableau or Power BI, and then it can join up with the rest of your business, because those tools are fantastic. And they're the enterprise version of Data Studio, so to speak. Data Studio is a bit clunky. Do you want your data there? Sometimes it's sketchy getting in non-Google data into there. Can you trust it? That sort of thing. So yeah, there's quite a few different products out there as well. There's Mixpanel, there's Ringside. Again, they've all got different things. There's Go Squared, Woopra, Plausible. There's lots of these different things. So have a think about what could be beneficial for your business. And what do you actually need? And then also, the tool is only as good as the people who use it. So don't go mad. Like if you haven't got the resource in house, why have the best tool that needs the most configuration and the most this or the most support? Think about what, as a business, the people can use and what you're going to be able to make decisions on.
Yeah, I think that's really sensible advice. Too many businesses I've seen invest in technology that they don't use, and they pay license fees for no reason. Or they give really skilled people crap tools and don't invest in the right tools to let them do their job properly. So it's a classic e-commerce dichotomy. But that's covered off all the question. I think what I've taken from this is basically you can't not act. Yeah. And the actions that you can take are to basically make sure you've got a GA4 property set up and don't obsess about getting it to the nth degree of customization in phase one. That makes perfect sense, the prioritization piece. But familiarize yourself with it. And if there are any doubts in the background, evaluate alternatives so that you know you're making the right decision basically for the long term. Would that seem like a fair enough summary? I know that does an injustice to the amount of detail that you both added.
I mean, I've had obviously since the announcement in March, I've had a lot of inquiries. I'm sure Anna has as well. For some people, when I had my discovery call, I've said I actually don't think this is the right option for you because of the size of the business and what they want out of it. Echoing what Anna was saying. It was a small-ish e-commerce shop that was making a good, healthy revenue for the people running it, but the amount of work involved, it's just not there. But one thing that all of these discovery calls came out with is they were like, oh, but there's still work then. I was like, yeah, whether you go to GA4 or Fathom or Plausible, you still have to do a migration. You still have to think about what data you're going to be exporting. And we also need to think about these other tools and how they are also going to be working in a cookieless world. Something that we didn't mention about GA4, which came out only in the last week of March, GA announced after all this stuff with Google Analytics is illegal in France and Austria. They basically turned around now and said with GA4, they will truncate the IP address before it's stored and processed. And we can now then decide where we would like our data to be stored. So if you want it to be in Dublin or you want it to be in England or you want it to be in France, you can say, where do I want that data to come in? So it will be interesting to see how these other GA alternatives, which feels to me like if Universal Analytics was an automatic car, these other tools feel like driving stick. It's familiar, but you've just kind of got to get around a little bit because it's kind of the same and very familiar. But depending on how much you're investing in your marketing strategies, if you are in the Google ecosystem, you can't get away with it. The other tools will not do what Google Analytics can do for paid media. So for some people, whether you like it or not, you're just going to have to move over to GA4 or go to another paid solution. But I think all of this in summary, there's work to be done. So roll your sleeves up and let's get going. We're all in this together. We're all learning. We're all giving our resources. But also that we are moving away from free analytics as well. So whether you're using Fathom or Plausible, it's going to be like $9, $10 a month. And if we're using BigQuery, maybe $9 a month getting that historical data. So in 2024, you're going to have a marketing budget where there's going to be a tiny line for your analytics to be stored, or you go blind, like as in we don't track anything and we just kind of go, the wind's going in this direction, let's do this with the strategy. And do you know what? Some people will do that and they'll do all right because, it's a smallish business and they can get away with it.
Some people do that even when they have the data.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's still the Hippo analytics method, isn't there?
Yeah. The data tells us this, but we don't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now that's really sensible advice, and I'm sure there's be some people listening and go, oh, I've got more questions, or actually I'd quite like to talk to you. There might be a project here. So, Jill, how can people reach out to you if they want to talk to you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. The beautiful thing about being called Jill Quick is there are not many Jill Quicks in the world. So I'm quite easy to find on LinkedIn and Twitter, or my website, The Colouring In Department. I'm going to Measure Camp for the first time in May. So if anybody's going there, then come out and say hi. I'm going to be tagging along with Anna.
Cool. And Anna, same question to you. If people want to contact you and discuss anything further or talk about a project, where do they go?
So polka.data is the name of my company. My email address is nice and simple. It's anna@polka.data.com, or on my website, you can book in a time to just have a chat. I've got an automatic calendar working. Boop, boop. I'm not so good at the LinkedIn thing. And I know, right? To be honest, I've been paying for it for a while and not using it. It's one of those things, there's that tool that, you've got to think about what's worthwhile. So let's make it worth my while that I put it in place. You can book some time with me just for a 30-minute free consultation, just to chat. What are your needs? My team, where Jill does fantastic audits, planning, mapping, she's an absolute wizard on that. We do that within what we do, although not always to the length that Jill does. We're very bullet pointy, and then we do the implementation. So sometimes we'll take Jill's fantastic audits and we'll then build the tracking code to it. So we each offer sort of complementary services to get people up and running with GA4. We're happy, we work together on a few things, but we can talk about, if anybody does need GA4 support, whether you need quick and dirty or whether you need Jill's amazing helicopter driving guide.
Fantastic. I'm loving the analogies, pets and mobiles covered in today's podcast. Look, Anna, Jill, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed this. I've learned some new stuff, which is great. And I always knew I would by doing this episode with you. So purely selfish on my part, obviously. And thanks everyone for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it just as much and you got some practical insights here. Keep an ear out for the next episode. We drop them every Tuesday. And do subscribe if you haven't already. Get alerts every week. And we'd love a rating on Apple or Spotify. So until next week, everyone. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.